8 unconscious bodies, 10 victims left gasping for air, and a jaw-dropping 95% finish rate. Shavkat Rakhmonov doesn't just win fights, he leaves no room for survival. With 19 victories and 0 defeats, this undefeated Kazakh warrior isn't just breaking chins and crushing demons. He even broke Laura Sanko's heart. The only time Nomad didn't close the show legally was against Ian Gary when he fought the Irishman while injured. Aside from that, every one of his fights has been an attempted homicide. Without further ado, here are the 10 times Shavkat Rakhmonov obliterated his opponents. Versus Carlston Harris. On February 5, 2022, Shavkat Rakhmonov was set to lock horns with Carlston Harris in what was his third fight in the UFC. Harris was riding a 5-fight winning streak, including 2 flawless UFC performances against Christian Aguilera and Impa Kasangane. But when facing the hard-hitting Nomad, Harris immediately felt a gap between himself and the Kazakh fighter. In the first round, it was evident that Shavkat had seen one too many Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, as he launched a spinning hook kick from hell that dropped his adversary onto the canvas.
Another one!
The cutthroat Nomad smelled blood and pounced on his wounded prey like a predator that hadn't eaten for days. The final blow was a signature, signed, sealed, and delivered, leaving his opponent frozen like Elsa. Versus Alex Oliveira. Making a splash in your first appearance on the big stage is a feat that only a few can pull off. However, Nomad was skilled enough to be an exception. In his UFC debut on October 24, 2020, he was set to face Alex Oliveira, a dangerous knockout artist who had just won 2 bouts against Max Griffin and Peter Sabata. This Brazilian wasn't your average fighter or a warm-up bout for a newcomer. At the time, Oliveira was a UFC vet who had been with the organization for almost 6 years, held a notable victory over former UFC interim champ Carlos Condit. However, just a minute into the fight, Alex felt that versus Park Jun-yong. That wasn't the first nor the last time Nomad would resort to an anaconda-like squeeze. When he was 6-0 as a professional and barely scratching the surface on the big stage, Rakhmonov was matched against Park Jun-yong, who was supposedly his first serious challenge. At the time, this Korean fighter was just another young prospect chasing his dream. However, he's now in the UFC and boasts an impressive record of 18-6. The foe thought taking the hard-hitting maestro to the ground was a good idea, but he soon found himself in big trouble as Shavkat swiftly snatched his arm. The Korean proved tougher than a rusty old pickup truck and managed to escape the position. Instead of learning his lesson from the first round, he went for the same tactic in the second. However, this time, Rakhmonov reversed the positions and came out on top. He then took the bull by the horns, put the hooks in, and subjected the Korean to an airtight rear naked choke.
자세가 지금 라크모노프 거 완벽하지 않기 때문에 조금만 더 빼주면 됩니다.
하지만 라크모노프의 왼손이 지금
탭했어요.
탭 나왔네요.
Versus Faudun Odam. As you already know, Rakhmonov isn't a one-dimensional fighter who relies strictly on submissions. He's a perfect blend of knockout artist and submission wizard. On May 12, 2018, the heavy-hitting Nomad was scheduled to fight Faudun Odam for the local KZMMAF welterweight title. A vicious uppercut followed by a knee discouraged the Tajik fighter from keeping the fight standing. However, keeping Shavkat down proved tougher than he could have anticipated. Rakhmonov subjected his adversary to a gravity shock treatment and quickly mounted him. He then rained down punishment from the top until the referee jumped in to save Odam from spending the night in an emergency room. Versus Michel Prazeres. Fast forward 3 years, and Shavkat was matched with Michel Prazeres, a battle-tested vet and a second-degree BJJ black belt. From 2015 to 2018, Prazeres went on an 8-fight winning streak, including a big win over future title challenger Gilbert Burns, before he was edged out on the judges' scorecards by Ismail Nordiev. The fight against Rakhmonov was supposed to put him back on the winning track, but unfortunately for him, the Nomad had different plans that night. In the first round, Prazeres was hugging Rakhmonov more than a koala clings to a eucalyptus tree. But the Kazakh fighter had enough and executed a beautiful takedown from the clinch that would make even Makhachev envious. But the real action began in the second round when Shavkat launched his ballistic missiles. His adversary sought refuge on the canvas but was quickly reversed and punished for his mistake, as Rakhmonov dropped a heavy cargo of bombs from the top. Those shots bleached Michel's black belt in an instant. Now he was a sitting duck for a submission. Seizing the momentum, Shavkat wrapped his arms around his opponent's neck and locked in the submission like he had the key to his escape. Versus Neil Magny. By the spring of 2019, the M1 Global Welterweight Championship was vacant and up for grabs. When this Russian organization called the Nomad, he had no second thoughts. Rakhmonov was matched against the 10-2 Russian powerhouse Neil Prazeres in an attempt to win his first major title. The fight was an explosion of violence from the opening bell. They played a chess match at close range, but Shavkat had the slight advantage in the artillery exchanges. As the second round started, the Nomad stalked his victim into an ambush, pulled the trigger, and finished the sequence with a takedown. From there, he was a real pit bull on the floor, tearing his opponent apart with punches. Prazeres blocked shots like his life depended on it, and at that moment, it probably did. But eventually the fortress was penetrated, and the Russian found himself semi-unconscious on the floor.
That was some solid ground and pounding. Well, we said it was going to be a hard fight.
Versus Verow. In his first title defense, the heavy-hitting Nomad was scheduled to face Verow, a knockout artist with a PhD in violence who held an impressive record of 27-6. Rakhmonov drew first blood and then scored a takedown. From that point, he stayed in the driver's seat as the foe stoically absorbed everything thrown at him. After an unsuccessful takedown attempt, the foe hit a dead end on the floor, and there was Shavkat dropping bombs from the top. Hurt from the punishment, Thiago was left with a leaking gas tank and had nothing on the feet for Shavkat. The Nomad seized the opportunity and unleashed a nuclear spinning attack that made the foe do the chicken dance. He then launched an assault like a general leading an invasion until the referee jumped in to stop the torture seminar. And this was the performance that earned Rakhmonov his golden ticket to the UFC. Versus Neil Magny. Speaking of the UFC, there's a fighter at welterweight who holds the record for the most wins in UFC welterweight history at 22, an achievement that will hardly be matched by anyone else. His name is Neil Magny, and on June 25, 2022, he was scheduled to face the Nomad. Since making his UFC debut, Magny has fought the best of the best, with notable victories over names like Kelvin Gastelum, Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, and Robbie Lawler. The list goes on. But when he stepped into the cage with Rakhmonov, he quickly realized he was facing a different kind of animal. From the moment the fight started, Shavkat took the initiative by dragging the fight to the canvas and turning on his ground and pound shredder as usual. In the second round, the Kazakh fighter picked up right where he left off, continuing the punishment on the floor. After 4 minutes of struggle, the American finally exposed his neck and was caught in an airtight guillotine that forced the tap. This victory granted Rakhmonov his second Performance of the Night award after the Carlston Harris spinning kick KO, and it won't be his last post-fight bonus. Versus Jeff Neal. In the following year, Shavkat Rakhmonov stepped into the cage against the dangerous slugger Jeff Neal, a man determined to showcase the different levels in this game. Known as Hands of Steel, Neal had built a reputation for shutting opponents' lights out. When two heavy hitters eager to trade bombs meet in the octagon, chaos is inevitable. The fight kicked off with Neal firing a high kick and a crisp boxing combo that immediately caught Shavkat's attention. The Kazakh warrior wasted no time in firing back, returning the favor with the same technique and landing it clean. As the round neared its end, the Nomad launched a relentless assault, backing Neal up and asserting his dominance. Rakhmonov carried that momentum into the second round, unleashing vicious combinations that left Neal scrambling to find an answer. It was a one-sided demolition, with Shavkat playing the role of the blacksmith and Neal being the unfortunate anvil. The third round echoed the chaos of the Carlston Harris fight when Shavkat fired off a spinning heel kick that partially landed. Neal, showing his grit, bit down on his mouthpiece and swung back, triggering an all-out war. For the first time, the Nomad felt the heat of a firefight, but he weathered the storm, quickly clinching to regain control. Composed and calculated, Shavkat resumed his onslaught, dragging Neal into deep waters with a flurry of punishing punches and slicing elbows. Then, in a picture-perfect finish, Rakhmonov wrapped up the fight with a beautifully executed standing rear naked choke, sending Jeff Neal to sleep early that night. Versus Stephen Thompson. The heavy-hitting Nomad decided to end 2023 with a bang and improve his record further. However, standing across from him was Stephen Thompson, a striking virtuoso and two-time title challenger. Wonder Boy had never been submitted in his professional career, but the Kazakh fighter was willing to put that stat to the test. Shavkat muscle finish, fight fans? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more MMA content like this.